Do you believe that the GOP and the Democrats will campaign on affirmative action in 2024? Why? Affirmative action is the practice or policy of favoring individuals belonging to groups regarded as disadvantaged or subject to discrimination. Recently, the Supreme Court in the cases Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard and Students for Fair Admissions v. University of North Carolina, the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-2 and 6-3 decision that Harvard's admissions program violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Affirmative action is largely considered a wedge issue among the American public, although polling varies depending on how the question is stated. According to a Pew Research poll, 50 of the polled persons opposed the practice, 33 supported it. If you divide it by race, African Americans largely support the practice, with 47 of African Americans approving of the practice, with 29 holding a negative opinion of it. Asian Americans and whites largely disapprove of the practice, with them holding a 52 and 57 disapproval rating respectively. Interestingly, Hispanics hold a 39 disapproval and approval rating, meaning that even among its beneficiaries, the practice still is relatively controversial. X200B. In what way can you picture Democrats and Republicans running on the policy of affirmative action? Will the GOP use it to try to attract Asian Americans to the party? Why do you think Hispanics hold such a divided opinion on the practice? Do you think it would be smarter for the Democrats to avoid the issue? X200B. I don't. I think Democrats know that the issue isn't popular with most of the country and won't run on it or even defend it. Republicans may try, but it will be hard to do if the Democrats aren't pushing back. No. It doesn't poll well in either direction, and it isn't a priority for the vast majority of the electorate. Campaigning on it, or against it, won't move votes. No, because I don't think it's that popular. If Dems were to advocate changing affirmative action to be based on income poverty level, that might be popular. Unlikely to be a major issue going into the next election given all the other things people are worried about, so I'm going to say no. Up until now, this was hardly in the news and people weren't paying much attention to it. Will the Democrats? Probably not. Most voters don't understand how it works, and even if they might support the goals of the policy, their understanding is limited to, well, it's just reverse discrimination. Given the approval ratings of the practice among key demographics, it's unlikely the Democrats will lean into it. Will the Republicans? Sure. It'd make decent fodder for the culture war. Brag about being the party truly dedicated to ending racism. Anything can be used in the culture war if you simplify it enough. As a Democrat, I hope they don't. Using race as a consideration isn't right, and this is coming from a PUC. I do hope legacy admissions are also removed. Education should be fair and equitable, not driven by people's color or class. I do hope the government does more to support students who have done well in school. If you have an amazing GPA, you should have a lot of support to learn because it helps our nation. I doubt the Dems will campaign on affirmative action. The program has always been a controversial one, even among Democratic supporters. Taking up that flag is a poison pill in an election year where giving up any more control of government to conservatives would be a major disaster. Better to just avoid it. If they think it's an issue, they should just focus on the root causes of the problem, rather than just a side effect. I really don't think it matters at all because there's basically no one who is a single-issue voter for this specific issue. After the SCOTUS decision, isn't the only way to legalize affirmative action to repeal the 14th Amendment? I don't think anyone thinks that's a good idea. I think only one specific group is for affirmative action these days in truth. Aside from that one group, it's a hard sell, and even California doesn't want affirmative action anymore. I think that's a mistake. Abortion being illegal back to states yet limits women's reproductive health choices. This issue has been around forever. And lots of folk on both sides think affirmative action at colleges was out of control, and has been for some time. There is a valid case to be made that it has overstated its welcome. And that case is made on reason, not archaic religion, in the case of abortion. If I were Biden, I wouldn't make this your hill to die on. Focus more on abortion. People are more upset at that being taken away. Dems would be stupid to campaign on it because majority of Americans don't want it. Hiring people based on race has always been indiscriminatory. We cannot solve racism by prejudging people based on race. And I do believe Democrats' constant focus on race takes away from instances of actual racism. The Democrats need to talk about how a women's right to health care was taken away a year ago. They need to talk about that now, a year from now and a decade from now. This should be one of the biggest talking points of theirs for years to come. It is a winning issue. No matter your view on affirmative action, it is not a winning issue. It's a complicated issue that easily confuses people. The Dems need to practice sticking with the winning issue. They will in districts where they think it might move the needle. In communities where folks are strongly in favor of it, Dems will point to the evil reps and what has happened. In communities against affirmative action, reps will point to how judges nominated by their side protect the citizens from it. Most of campaigning is telling people what they want to hear. Why would that stop now? The Republicans are the only side that would in an attempt to get Asian Americans to vote for them. For Democrats it should be a non-issue. African Americans who support affirmative action already vote Democrat for the most part. Lobbying to try and bring it back only hurts Democrats with white voters. I don't think that the change to affirmative action itself is going to upset a lot of people, except some fringe groups on the left, but the acceptance of legacy admissions being prioritized at universities just may. And it should tbh it's a clear example of discrimination that flies in the face of their own ruling. I don't think it will be the racial component that angers people moving forward, it will be the class component. No, affirmative action is a dead topic until the political court is corrected, and precedent gets reinstated. Democrats should avoid this issue like the plague. Nothing but downside. AA was an important statement policy back in the 60s but now is no longer necessary. Colleges will have ample ways to circumvent the ruling to continue to try and balance representation on campuses. Fighting for it now will make Democrats look like the kind of identity politics cultists that turn off the middle American white voters needed to keep Trump out of office. Let Republicans run on it and remind people that they just don't like black and brown people. Both will campaign on SCOTUS judges. I think the biggest issue is the partisanship in the SCOTUS. If it continues down the path we will regress. Yes, because dividing the plebs by race has been working great, no reason to stop now. Nope, if a policy takes more than a sentence to explain what it is, it will not be popular with the population. Even I can't explain fully what it is and why we need it. It's a lost cause. Dems need to take the L and move on. There's different ways to go about it, I'm sure. The GOP will absolutely campaign on affirmative action, just as they'll campaign on overturning Roe v. Wade and discrimination against LGBTQ. Why? Because they're bigots who want to turn the country into the Handmaid's Tale. The Democrats will use the Supreme Court's rulings to highlight the contrast between themselves and the GOP. Democrats are likely to attempt to replace affirmative action with adversity points, which includes, but are not limited to, race. But they are not going to campaign on that. A far bigger problem is that legacy students make up 90% of admits to the Ivies. AA only applies to the remaining 5%. So it is trivial in impact. They don't really have to, they'll already have the win by default. Probably the less they say about it the better. All they really have to do is mention the Supreme Court and everyone who's pro-affirmative action will be on board, and they won't lose anyone who's against it. Don't know if you know many Asian Americans, but they are mostly conservative, as is already